Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they getting?
Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Need that. Need that.
All right, welcome on back to another edition of the Baltimore Beatdown Podcast. It is Monday night, January 31st, 2022. My name is Jake Luke. I'm joined on my screen by Kyle Barber. We're closing out January here, bud. Who had us doing that? And it is a little mini pod here, maybe a micro pod. I don't know if I want to say micro pod. I feel like there's maybe a little bit of a connotation there that we want to avoid, but there's a mini pod, a reaction that we were doing here to John Harbaugh's season-ending press conference. But before we get into that, how's it going, pal?
It's going well. It's been a tumultuous January. I got COVID, as you know, and that one was rough. I was going through it. I didn't have the light, just a cold variation. I had the 103-degree fever and starting to get a little scared kind of version. It was not pleasant. So everybody take care and do what you can to not catch it, because that was not fun. I'm over it. I got a negative test from the 29th. That's why I was in person at the press conference. I was not going to go there unless I got that PCR that told me I was negative. So we're good, and we were back and rolling, and we got to finally hear from John Harbaugh, which was really exciting, and learn from him and hear his side of things. And the media took their rounds. And it was a good press conference, and I'm happy to talk about it.
I think it was. I think it's interesting because people, and I think myself included, were maybe getting a little antsy. And I feel like this maybe happens more often than we would think, and especially in a year where there's no playoff games. It felt like to me, and maybe my timelines are mixed up, but it felt like he met with the media like immediately after that Buffalo game. And maybe I'm misremembering it, but that felt like kind of a salty press conference. They're doing it over Zoom. He's wearing the mask. He's kind of like pushing back on some of the wide receiver questions and stuff like that. It wasn't totally satisfying. This time, I was talking about this with Spencer a little bit. They took their time with it. They gave it a few weeks. They let things simmer. He gets up there in front of the podium. He's looking good. He's sounding good, and he sounded relaxed. We didn't get sort of the salty, kind of angry John that we've come to know. That you've come to know, and I've talked to other guys that are in that room when he gets that way, and it's not a fun experience for anyone. There was a lot of perspective on the season. There was a lot of, you could tell he had gone down to Florida and met with the head honchos, and he had really kind of had time to chew on what had just happened for the last 4 months or so, and he had a lot of good answers, and there were a lot of good questions asked by some smart people. So I was pretty satisfied with what we saw.
Yeah, I was really happy about it. I think, like I said, the media had some, sharp questions that weren't softballs. People asked what was going on, and people were curious to hear from him about the coordinator situation, both on offense and defense. Wanted to hear about the roster construction, the future of the team, and really, I think we got our answers from him. And I also agree that he was more calm. He wasn't as reactive as we've seen him after a crushing loss. I don't blame him for ever being, more frustrated after a loss than a win. I mean, that's how we all would react, I think, if we were on the losing end of something even small, let alone being, a head coach on the national stage in the NFL, and your team loses in frustrating fashion. So I liked the fact that we got a little bit of a hiatus before this, but it was a little lengthy, as you said. I think people are getting antsy. I think the fan base was getting antsy, but I think right around 2 to 3 weeks makes sense for a break before really going through and taking a 45-minute press conference with the media about how the season concluded.
Yeah, definitely. I think Luke says here in the comments, I think being able to decompress after a stressful season really changes how someone would be at a press conference. I totally agree. That was my read on it. And yeah, I think it was just, for a team that lost 6 straight and, had all these injuries and had this really frustrating end to what was once a very promising campaign. I think taking some time off, allowing yourself to sort of ruminate on that, what went wrong, what you liked, and what went right. There were certainly a lot of people who had their issues because they felt like he kind of just went up there and said nothing. And like, that's not totally off base. I don't think that's kind of what these things are to an extent where, last year around this time, you have Eric DaCosta going up there and talking about how he's quite insulted that people in the media are, insulting the Ravens receivers or whatever. And then he goes out and he makes 2 relatively big ticket acquisitions, or maybe even 3, depending on how you strike it at that position. But yeah, it was nice. And I figured we could break it down by just going through your article that you wrote for BaltimoreBeatdown.com, where you kind of had your main points there. And it's a good segue, I think, because your first bullet point that you have here that a lot of people had some issues with, I think predictably, but also like, come on, guys, what are we doing? We knew this was going to happen. Your first bullet point, Greg Roman will return, which we already kind of knew. They had tacitly acknowledged it by not firing him. He says, he says that he'll return, but he also, of course, leaves the door somewhat open with his whole, you never know what's going to happen thing, which when Greg Roman is still this team's coordinator in like late August, people are still going to be clinging on to that. So thanks, John, there. But yeah, Greg Roman going to be back as offensive coordinator in 2021.
Yeah, he's going to be coordinating this team for, I believe, a 4th year. I think it makes sense at some parts of this. I can understand the fan base's frustration, but I also see there's some reason behind it. I wrote in my article that, yes, you can definitely check out at BaltimoreBeatdown.com and kind of follow along with us to those that are listening live. And if you're not listening live, you're tuning in, you can read my full thoughts that I wrote down about all of this as I attended the press conference on Monday. But the offense suffered arguably more significant injury than the defense did. We saw as Ronnie Stanley was out before week 2 of the season, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards did not play a regular season snap for the offense. And so when the tackle situation was poor, Alejandro Villanueva mightily struggled. It doesn't take PFF to tell you that. We saw it. We saw him struggle, and it's unfortunate because a lot of us had some high hopes for him, at least stepping in at right tackle with Ronnie Stanley hopefully being healthy, but that didn't turn out to be the case. And so the offense was hurt at significant spots on the offense, which is tackle, which the Ravens face off against a plethora of talented pass rushers. They got, T.J. Watt with the Steelers, Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson. All of those guys are dynamos of pass rushers, and they're in the division. They faced them for 6 games, and that's not including anybody else that they faced off against. So not being able to have strong tackles against such strong pass rushers makes passing the football hard. It also makes running the football hard, and especially when you don't have the playmakers like Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins to do so. I've talked about it all season. I've talked it with you guys in the Slack. I've talked about it on social media that everybody was gearing up to expect J.K. Dobbins to have a 1,400-yard season. Daniel Jeremiah was like, this guy is going to go for 1,300 to 1,500 yards. He looks incredible when he was attending the Ravens training camp, and everybody was in agreement with him. And I believe it was Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire said, I'd be very scared to see Gus Edwards get a 250 carry season after J.K. Dobbins went down, because Gus Edwards is a weapon. And him getting a full starters series of snaps when J.K. Dobbins went down was something still to be excited about. And that's something we missed out on as well, because Gus Edwards suffered that ACL injury all the same. So Greg Roman wasn't playing with a full, set of cards. And it was something that was challenging for them. And I think that hindered his abilities, which his strengths are with the run game. we do know that he is especially talented at scheming up run game situations and coordinating one of the best run games in the NFL. He was the offensive coordinator for the 2019 season, which was an NFL record for rushing yards. And J.K. Dobbins was quite possibly the best back that this team has seen over the course of these 4 years with Greg Roman. So we didn't get to see any of that. And when he's not being able to utilize all of the talents on the roster that was expected, and you go to the veteran bargain bin for the run game, I can see that there's a fair case to be made for Greg Roman to return. And I am not as upset about it as the overwhelming majority of the fans covering the team.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point there, and I think it's one that has been made ad nauseum, not just by us, but by a lot of people who maybe have the ability to step back a little bit and I shouldn't say the ability, because fans have the ability to do this too, but like, you just kind of, if you're going to cover this team, even in like the partial capacity that we do, you have to like be able to pull back a little bit and look at it with some logic, as opposed to emotional results-based thinking, in a way that fans are afforded a little bit more. So to me, the way I'm looking at it is, I'm interested to see what the reaction is when this offense is undoubtedly going to look a lot better over the first 6 weeks of this season than they did in the last 6 weeks. Just by default, like they're gonna be better at tackle. They're gonna be better along the offensive line. They're gonna be looking good at wide receiver with some of these young guys they have. They're gonna look good with these running backs coming back. Like, it's gonna look a little bit better. And I know it's literally turned into a meme and a joke at this point, where people are like photoshopping Roman with like unsavory characters and trying to like get him fired by social media campaigning, which I think is you can have your laughs at that and stuff, and I certainly do. But I don't know, man. Like, they're going to look better to at least start out the season. And I'm not, at this point, with the way that things have devolved with him, I'm not expecting him to get a ton of credit when that does ultimately happen. But it does feel like they're due for a course correction, kind of by default here. Same thing on defense with the way all the injuries played out on that side of the ball too. But it'll be interesting to see. He's sticking around, and we're certainly gonna have a lot to say on that over the course of the offseason and the coming season.
Yeah, overall, I liked what we saw out of Greg Roman at times. I think everybody liked what they saw out of him at times. There's frustrating parts to it, but that's also normal. I don't see Chiefs fans clamoring for Eric Bieniemy to be fired after a terrible playoff game. But oh my goodness, if that was the Ravens in that situation, we'd have to call the National Guard in, because it was a bad collapse by them. So I just compare this team and compare the problems that they're experiencing with other teams. And I respect the standard that's been set here in Baltimore. And it makes me, it makes it a joy to cover a team that has an expectation of success. And there's frustrations when an 8-9 season is poor, because by other team standards, that's a success. But it wasn't here in Baltimore, and that's awesome that it's not. But like you said, you got to pull on the reins a little bit. And at the end of it, Greg Roman is going to be the offensive coordinator. That's John Harbaugh's plan, and that's what he expects Greg Roman to have as his plan. So we'll see what occurs when we're in August. But like you said, the door just had to be left open just a crack, just for fans to be holding and clutching onto something.
He's trolling us at that point, isn't he? He had to do that just for us, so that we have to keep dealing with these questions.
I talked about it on 105.7 with Jerry. I did an interview today too on there, and he's like, yeah, he left the door open, didn't he? Because he noticed and mentioned that too. But I think it's more like, you're always like, oh yeah, like I think my friend's coming over tonight. I'm pretty sure, and like if they show up, then it's okay. But if they don't, then you're like, well, I didn't promise that they were going, or like I didn't promise I was going to my, out to your party. I was like, my plans are to do that. So just in case a situation to evolve in that. But yeah, it's a little frustrating just from our standpoint, because with Baltimore Beatdown, we get fans that have opinions and have strong opinions, and they want to voice them, and it's not as much nuance as it is, like you said, unsavory photos of him with characters that aren't of the highest quality, and being photoshopped on, which I find it incredibly awkward. And also, like, it's funny, don't get me wrong, I laugh at it, it's okay to laugh, but like it's also really like strange just at, like, taking a step back and taking like the perspective of, like, are we really doing this? Like, we really got to Photoshop Greg Roman with certain historical figures that aren't the most appropriate.
Some of whom not even that historical. Some of whom that just recently deceased, whether by
Yeah.
their own hand or other hands.
Yes. It's peculiar, no doubt about it. But let's move on to the next bullet point here.
Steve Saunders will return. So you write here, the Ravens sustained overwhelming injuries in 2021. In response, Harbaugh stated he spent 4 hours with the performance staff going over different practice models, workouts, and load management to improve the team. He said something to the effect of leaving no stone unturned as they hope to prevent another season of this caliber.
First off, I do not want to attend a 4-hour meeting with John Harbaugh in a field that is my specialty, that I did poor at, or that, unfortunate injuries, unfortunate circumstances arise that had us by far one of the worst in the NFL. Like, if my writing was really bad and I went through a 4-hour meeting with like Ryan Mink when I write late for work, like, that wouldn't be a pleasant 4 hours of defending like my apostrophe usage or my present tense versus past tense usage. Like, it would be a bad meeting. So I can only imagine that this meeting was not pleasant for the performance staff. Like, let's just start there.
Yeah, I think I think that's a point well made, and a point that I'd agree with. I think that's a tough situation to be in if you're those guys. But I mean, Saunders, like, we don't have to like relitigate all this stuff, but like Saunders has had, controversies of his own with the COVID thing in 2020, all this kind of thing. And then he has this season happen. And ultimately, like, I don't really, this doesn't really move the needle for me much one way or the other. Cause it's funny because I remember after the 2015 season is when he got hired. Right. Mm-hmm. And 2015 was one of the really bad injury years that we talk about. So he comes in 2016. And again, this is another pendulum swings back by default thing. They're kind of healthier. And I remember him getting a game ball that season because of like the health and the strength that like the team was kind of, being lauded for having. And I don't know, like, it just doesn't seem like it seems like to me when you're having a bunch of like nagging injuries and a bunch of like, oh, this guy's going to be out for a couple weeks, we don't totally know the timeline. Like, maybe that's a thing where you can point to your training staff and say like, okay, maybe there's something going on here. But when you have all these freak injuries like you did, I think that more just points to, and I know people don't love to hear the term bad luck, but there definitely is a lot of bad luck in play, and luck that is going to be kind of course corrected as we go into the 2022 season. So it doesn't totally just move the needle. I think for other reasons, I'd rather have him out of that building because he and I maybe disagree on certain issues, it would seem. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So whatever, it's just sort of wasted space even talking about it. But it was worth asking the question, and we have our answer. So
yeah, no doubt about it. I was surprised that he's returning. I'm not, like I said, a person that believes you should be so quick to call for someone's employment or unemployment. I think it's really awkward to be like, this person does not deserve to have a job for this organization. Like, I think there's so much behind the scenes that it's really awkward to call for something like that. But I thought if the Ravens were going to go in a different direction, this would be an area that they were going to do it, especially after hearing like they had a 4-hour meeting here where they're going through each and every injury and each and every player and talking about what happened and what they can do to prevent it and put in new like workout models and weightlifting models into the system to see like load management stuff. And I thought this would be an area, if they were going to change up, this would be the field that they would be going for. And I'm surprised that they're not, because we are still talking about injury stuff, and it's been 3 weeks to the end of the season. And I know that we're recapping the season, so it's going back to the discussion, but like Jeremy Fowler was writing about it just this weekend about teams that can bounce back and like what are they on the right track or what do they need to overhaul their team. And Fowler of ESPN wrote like the Ravens got to figure out how to get healthy and how to work on their injury prevention And the same went for like Jonas Schaefer of the Baltimore Sun just this weekend. Like the main priority for the Ravens is improving injury prevention. And if that's such a need and such a necessity for the team, maybe a switch at strength and conditioning coach would have been the area that they're going with, but they are sticking with Steve Saunders. And like you said, and a little bit of what John Harbaugh said at the presser, like it's cyclical, and they had the pendulum swing against them and heavier than it's ever swung. It felt like after they've been relatively healthy, like 2019, they were incredibly healthy, and we saw just how dominant this team was because they didn't have significant injuries to star players, but this time they had an overwhelming amount of injuries to it. So by no grace of their own, hopefully, and then some with their efforts, it won't be nearly as tumultuous as it was in the 2021 season.
Yeah, 100%. And it does kind of feel like another one of those pendulum things where it is going to maybe swing back in their favor, hopefully. Your next point, question you asked regarding their kind of offensive roster construction. So you phrased it as running in a passing league and how Harbaugh expects the offense to evolve. So you kind of asked him, how do you feel about your roster construction and the way it stacks up with the teams that are still playing in the playoffs right now, and the two teams that are going to be in the Super Bowl, obviously tending more towards passing offense versus constructing for a rushing offense? And he acknowledged your question. He kind of brushed it off a little bit, saying that, this is it's maybe a little bit of a mischaracterization of those teams to begin with. What was your reaction to all that?
So, yeah, I talked a little bit about how the Bengals and the Rams and the teams that are in the Super Bowl are passing offenses. They're high-flying offenses, I think the term that I said there, and that the Ravens are a run-based team. That's how they've constructed their roster in what feels like a passing era in the NFL, and if they feel like they're going a bit against the grain. I didn't get a response as to whether or not he feels like it's a little bit against the grain. And he kind of said that the Bengals and the Rams, that's a mischaracterization of their teams, and that they're good running teams as well. I disagree with that. I wrote in the article that the Rams were the number 5 passing offense during the regular season, and the Bengals were the number 17. They were both in the bottom half of the NFL for rushing yards in the regular season. And though, yes, they can run the ball effectively at times. Joe Mixon's a successful running back. We know that about him, and he's a talented back. But to say that their rushing offenses is unfair, and to say they're even balanced, I would disagree with, just because they're so talented through the pass. We saw firsthand that Joe Burrow can absolutely air it out against the Ravens' depleted secondary when he was going up against a possible single game NFL record for passing yards. And to see what we've seen out of Cooper Kupp this season and Jamar Chase, both, they were successful, wide receivers, and their quarterbacks are highly successful in Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow. But overall, I think that he did acknowledge the question by saying, yes, we do have a rushing offense, and that has been a staple of this team. It's been a staple of the Ravens, but they're building around their playmakers, and they were building around their players then. And that's who they designed their scheme around, is their players. And it's fair to do that when Lamar Jackson was, overwhelmingly talented as a rusher in the league that hadn't somewhat solved some of his rushing ability to the effect that they have. He's not a solved quarterback, and I hate that term, but I think nobody was expecting somebody so dynamic. Like they even said that Michael Vick hadn't been as much of a successful dual threat quarterback as Lamar Jackson had, and that's fair. And I think they built their team around that and the offensive line that they had with Marshall Yonda in 2019. And they don't have to do that as much anymore, because John Harbaugh noted that Lamar Jackson has progressed as a quarterback and he's developed more. They have more wide receiver threats with Marquise Hollywood Brown. They have Mark Andrews, and they also have Rashad Bateman, who's going to be back and healthy for a sophomore campaign. So he's talked about how much more they need to incorporate the passing offense and what they need to do with the rushing offense, because it's still a threat for them against opposing teams. Being able to run the football effectively is a positive, and fully abandoning all of that and the success that this team has had would be foolish to do. So it's about balance in the effect of what can we do to become more of a passing offense without sacrificing the talent that they have with Lamar Jackson as a runner and with the stable of healthy running backs next year with Dobbins and Edwards and the talent that they have at offensive line. So I liked that he responded saying like, yeah, we do run the football and that has been a staple of our team, but we don't have to be as effective at that anymore because of the players that we have on this roster, and then it's about solving to what effect they want to use, the two types of offense that they have, running and passing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and they've certainly made investments roster wise too, where you have Mark Andrews, who they pick in the 3rd round after already picking a pass catching weapon in the 1st round in Hayden Hurst. And Andrews obviously goes on to become a very good tight end. They pay him like one of the best, and then he played better than they even paid him arguably this year. So there's a big investment. 2 first-round picks on the outside in Hollywood Brown and Rashad Bateman, who Hollywood Brown is pretty much showing you who he is, and that's a pretty damn good receiver. And then Rashad Bateman is looking like he can maybe even be like better than that. So that's exciting. We'll see what happens with Nick Boyle coming back. Josh Oliver was, a little bit of investment. He didn't do much this past year, but maybe they have plans to get him back into the mix. They talked about maybe even adding a tight end. I think Harbaugh mentioned at one point again. So who knows? Maybe they want to get another even better kind of like space eating option there to add into that mix. Tylan Wallace, 4th round pick. I mean, they got guys in the mix here that, they invested heavily in. It's going to depend on their approach moving forward. And I do like one thing that he said. I'm sure you caught this, but he said that moving forward, they're probably going to get away even more from designed runs for Lamar Jackson, which to me means probably taking that up with passing plays and then going more to the schemed run game with their running backs. So excited to see the continued evolution of it. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with your question, and I think you got an interesting answer out of him. So
I can agree with that. And I just want to kind of echo what you've said. This team has put a lot of effort into creating a passing offense, and it can't be built overnight. And that's why they spent so much draft capital drafting wide receivers that weren't the prototypical Ozzie Newsome pick, which were players with great traits. And then we saw they had sometimes questionable hands. Rashad Perryman was one of them. There's some others that, you can look through. Jaleel Scott, Jordan Lasley were some others that they looked good and they had good measurables and some good traits, but they had some questionable parts to their game. Marquise Hollywood Brown is not that kind of a player, and Rashad Bateman is not that kind of a player. They're both known for talents on the football field and accomplishments, and so they've built up this offense, and they have Mark Andrews, who was the number 6 wide receiver or number 6 pass catcher in terms of yards this season. He was incredibly talented, and he did that with 3 different quarterbacks. So they have built a passing offense, and it's worth remembering that Lamar Jackson didn't play almost the entire back half of this schedule, which was a gauntlet of a schedule, as we know. So it appears that they are working towards a more optimized passing offense, walking a little bit away from the design runs for Lamar Jackson in favor of getting more, passing plays schemed up and, utilizing the running backs without sacrificing the opportunity to go downfield.
Absolutely. Next point. Marcus Peters returning, ? You say. And I think that was sort of implicitly understood by a comment that he made about getting 2 first-round corners back. So he obviously meant Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. So you mentioned in your write-up here, the conversation around Peters obviously has been that he's got a $15 million cap hit for 2022. You can save a pretty hefty $10 million cap hit by tearing that contract up, maybe reworking it, bringing him back, whatever it might be. But it does seem like a little bit of a difficult number. But it sounds like John expected him to be back. I'm still probably expecting them to try and get that thing reworked, but it does sound like there's optimism there, which I love because I feel like he's going to be a necessary piece on the back half of that defense.
Just as we're talking about the passing offense, pass defense is going to be critical for this team to become successful, especially with just how quickly this division has transformed and evolved with their AFC North rival Cincinnati Bengals are in the Super Bowl with one of the best passing offenses, not only in the conference but in the NFL. Being able to defend against that with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters is going to be critical. Marcus Peters is one of the best in generating takeaways. He's got the spirit and character to define the Baltimore Ravens defense. He is a fighter. He's a competitor. And I think every Ravens fan loves him and what he brings to the table. And not only do fans enjoy it, but the coaches and the players certainly follow behind him and echo his praises. When Gus Edwards and Marcus Peters both went down in back-to-back plays in training camp, I believe it was on the Lounge podcast when they were interviewing Marlon Humphrey. Like, somebody slammed their helmet. They were so frustrated with losing those two guys. Losing two guys just in general, I assume anybody be upset about. But like, there was rumor of a slammed helmet onto the turf because they had lost those guys. And Marcus Peters is a huge factor for the team. And he's going to be critical in their success to defend against the pass, which is the modern era of football. And I think it's, and my opinions are that's great. They need to have Marcus Peters back. He is the perfect number 2 cornerback in this modern era of football.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an attitude thing as well, isn't it? Where, everybody loves Marlon, but you have these games where they go out there and maybe he has a rough performance and then he's in the locker room dicking around on Twitter about NFTs like 30 minutes later. So as much as like that's fine and Marlon can do what he wants, like it's nice to have a guy on the other side of the ball who maybe brings something a little bit different. And the fact that they're both friends and, get along really well, I think only makes their dynamic an even better one. So it's one that I'd like to see continue along, especially for the fact that Calais Campbell might be gone. You got some other guys like Tyus Bowser's certainly a leader, but he is quiet as a mouse, as Steve Bisciotti would say. And, outside of that, it's like, where is kind of the veteran presence here? And Peters kind of would be one of the old guard. He was only drafted in 2015, but like, if they were to lose Campbell, and who knows what's going to happen with guys like Derek Wolfe, but like, he's all of a sudden, he would be bringing some of that, some people say leadership is overrated. I think it's maybe somewhere in the middle of being overrated and underrated. Maybe, kind of a relatively important thing. Probably would be good to bring him back for those reasons as well. So I am with you in that I think he's well worth bringing back. Hopefully you can get that salary number down, but either way, let's find a way to get him in the building.
I like that point that you made about leadership, and that's for a longer discussion. But just in short, the veterans were all the ones that were talking in the circle. Pernell McPhee and Calais Campbell to be the most notable ones. So losing both of those guys possibly, it would be interesting to go into next season and see who's going to be in the center of the circle, hyping up that defense and getting them ready for the games like we've seen them do season after season with somebody stepping in and doing that. But we can move on to the final point,
which is T. Martin is interviewing with the Buffalo Bills to take over as offensive coordinator after they had Brian Daboll hired away by the New York Giants in just an incredibly awkward video where Daboll arrived at the Giants facility, which looks like everyone's high school. He gets up his F-350 in a full suit. He chose not to take the suit jacket off while he was driving, which was an interesting move. Maybe it was staged for that reason. Who knows? I'm spending way too much time on this, but it was just an incredibly awkward video. So there's that. But yeah, he's gone out of Buffalo. Josh Allen and Sean McDermott are out in offensive play caller, so they put in a request to interview T. Martin.
This one's possibly the most concerning. People can be up in arms about Roman's return. You can consider Saunders' return as well. But this is the one that I have the most concern about because T. Martin has helped this passing offense, produce, great results. They got 2,000-yard receivers this season with Andrews and with Hollywood Brown. And also what a quiet 1,000 yards that Hollywood Brown produced as an aside real quick. Didn't expect that, everybody was like gunning for him to be hitting 1,000 yards. He does it. And and it couldn't be any more silent about the production there. I don't think a whole lot of people were impressed by it, even though they went through 3 quarterbacks to do it. So
I don't think he was impressed by it if you listen to his comments about it.
Yeah, I don't think he was happy about it, but I mean, 1,000 yards is 1,000 yards, 16 or 17 game season. I don't care. I think, of course, he had higher expectations, and I think we did too, because he was a dynamo in the first half of the season, and then there was struggles and injuries and yada yada yada, and unfortunately, he only got 1,008 yards. But as for T. Martin, I think he's been great for the Ravens, and the Bills have had an eye for talent over the last 4 or 5 years. Just as soon as they got Josh Allen was when the Ravens got Lamar Jackson. And both of these teams and both of these franchises have built themselves into successful contenders because of both their quarterbacks and who they've hired. They've rotated through and hired some, I believe, Ravens offensive line coaches at times. I believe Juan Castillo was over there at one point. I don't know if he still is, but they've had an eye for talent, and they've locked their gaze on T. Martin. And if he were to leave, I'm curious if Keith Williams would go with him. And he is a beloved figure for the Ravens. Everybody loves Keith Williams, Devontae Adams, Rashad Bateman. He's a wide receiver guru, as they call him.
Uncle Keith.
Keith that'd be another thing to hurt. And Bobby Ingram just left for the Wisconsin Badgers, and Steve Smith Sr. loved him. He talked about how he was a great wide receivers coach, and then he pointed to Mark Andrews that he became the tight ends coach for the Ravens, and look what Mark Andrews did this season. So they've lost some coaching talent, and this would be another pretty big loss. And T. Martin would have been, I think, he's been noted by fans as the option for Ravens offensive coordinator if they were to go in a different direction. Now they're not, and they're sticking with Greg Roman, and they could see T. Martin head for greener pastures with the Buffalo Bills with a promotion. So it'll be interesting to see if he heads out and what could occur from that. I think T. Martin has been a great coach for the Ravens. We saw their success with 2,000-yard receivers, Mark Andrews having a franchise record-breaking season, and I think part of that had to do with T. Martin. Give Greg Roman his dues on that. You never hear about Greg Roman getting any credit for that part. You only hear for T. Martin and Keith Williams, but T. Martin had a hand in it for sure, and there's a reason why they were successful, and there's a reason why the Bills want him for offensive coordinators, because he's a darn good coach.
Yeah, 100%. And it is a lot of brain drain, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But either way, I mean, I'm happy with the investment they've made at this position. I think overall, I think people tend to kind of put the blame more towards coaches and the credit more towards players. And I think coaches themselves would, prefer it be that way anyway. But it's an interesting thing where, fans can kind of go crazy about Roman and passing concepts this and route concepts that. And like all of a sudden when T. Martin, the guy who is ostensibly in charge of that stuff, gets an interview, he's like the next Bill Walsh. So, I think some of the fans maybe need to have some context there when it comes to that kind of thing. But I do like T a lot. I think he's a young rising star in that respect. And the wide receivers have done some good things, both through his and Keith's help. And Roman obviously isn't, completely without credit for that. But those guys probably did help with some of their improvements and is a good fit with some of these guys. We talked to Rashad last week, and he had said how much he loved T and Keith. So, I mean, that's all I need to hear to try and keep them in the building. So I hope they're able to do that. The Bills are out to a couple other different candidates, so it's not a done deal he leaves to begin with. So yeah, I like the idea of keeping them in the building. We'll see what happens. I'd be happy for T if he did kind of get there, because he was, just at USC, makes, the leap to the NFL, and then a year later, he's an offensive coordinator for one of the best offenses in the league, and is probably going to have success right away. That would be quite the meteoric rise, and I'd be happy for him. But yeah, selfishly, I do hope he remains for at least another year or two.
Absolutely, same here. Do we got any questions to go along with?
Got a lot of comments down here. So yeah, I think pretty much we've addressed all of that. And I am ready to actually. Are there compensatory picks or if a coach of color gets an OC position. I think it's just head coach. So Mark
it is only head coach and general manager that will get compensatory picks. It is not OC or DC. It is strictly head coach and general manager.
Yeah, so there wouldn't be any compensatory picks coming back if T. Martin were to become an offensive coordinator. So that wouldn't happen. But either way, I think that's pretty much all I had, Bud, here for our mini pod, unless you got anything else you want to throw out there.
That is everything. Just keep reading Baltimore Beatdown and listening to the, quote, spicy boys, as I see on here. Isn't that fun? Oh, I love it. This is everything. We can head on out of here.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for joining me at last minute here. It was actually your idea to hop in here and do these things. So we're probably, for your guys' info, going to be hopping in Wednesday night and probably Friday night as well to break down the Mike Macdonald introductory press conference and then Eric DaCosta's presser as well. He's actually, I think he's in Mobile right now for the Senior Bowl, so I'm not totally sure how that's going to work. I think they do come back before the game. They only like to be there for the practices, so I'm sure that's what it is. But whole slate of content coming your way this week. We might be trending more towards the shorter side, like this one, 40 minutes or so each time. But thanks for hopping in with me, Bud. It's a pleasure as always. And go ahead and plug your social media and your work before we get rolling.
For sure. Definitely, as always, read Baltimore Beatdown. We have Monday through Friday daily Ravens news articles that collects and finds all the best Ravens news across the internet. And Voss does an excellent job of doing that Monday through Friday. We also have some, I like to think, decent articles written by yours truly and everybody else here at Baltimore Beatdown. If you enjoy kind of this live conversation style, I do stream over at twitch.tv/Baltimore Beatdown. Play a little retro bowl and some video games there, and I also answer questions and hop around all that. So that's always fun. Other than that, read Late for Work from BaltimoreRavens.com every Monday morning. That's when I have my published piece for Late for Work. That's the only edition that's better than Ravens News because that's the one published by me. So I'm going to act like I'm better than that. So that's the only time I'm competing with Voss on anything. But other than that, as always, definitely like and subscribe this podcast on YouTube and give these guys the ratings. Jake and Spencer do a phenomenal job of producing this every week, and I gush about them every time I hop on here because it's really easy to be a manager of a podcast that really runs itself. Jake has been an excellent producer and writer and host and co-host of this show, and Spencer does a phenomenal job with analysis that even I can't handle. So shout out to these guys as always, and definitely listen to their stuff and follow them and give them the credit that they deserve.
Well, the check is in the mail for that compliment. Thank you very much, pal. Let's get out of here. Thank you guys for listening. Go ahead and follow the show on social media. If you liked what you heard, you can find us on Twitter at Podcast Beatdown. I am at Jake Luke. That is LOUQUE. Find us on Instagram at Baltimore_Beatdown. And we're on Facebook as well. I think just under Baltimore Beatdown. So thanks again for listening, guys. We will talk to you again very soon. And until then, we'll see you.
Peace.
Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they giving? Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.